wish I could do that for my team, but I can't. I wasted 3 hours watching the game that they lose in the last second.
I was gonna say, yeah, your team was looking so good too.
But you know what? Because Boy Genius is a great offensive play caller to the Packers.
I've been noticing that too.
Well, the same thing happened to Tony Moore.
Yeah, that's true.
Another Boy Genius.
Difference is, you know, I understand coaching styles.
What?
I understand coaching styles. And Danny was like too much.
Yeah.
Joke.
That's always sweet. You find out they're a hell of a lot more creative than you.
I didn't realize how much work it was.
So I ended up making him go instead. I got way too excited. Yeah, I was so frightened.
I played him in the Great Day League, Amway.
And so I thought
You seem so excited that we're all gonna start, but
it was going to be something where they're going to just put us back down so I could get a few photos, like report back. But they're like, no, you're going all the way to Valley Children. I was like, no, I'm not. And luckily, he is braver than I am to go. No, then I said, you guys. Yeah, that was horrible. I should have just had you go.
well, you were like a sister about her.
Yeah, they just threw me in. Yeah, I didn't. I didn't want it. I didn't want it at all. They were like, next year, when we asked, we just have to do it. I was like, I didn't want to to pray to my gods and set everything in order. That one was a little, it was like too off the cusp to like jump into it. Oh yeah, and especially because I guess they started, I don't know how high they were above some houses, but they almost had to land in Fresno Christian over his pupils. And so that's where I would have done the whole, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Yeah, let me call my mom type of thing. Yeah. They'll just have to get that video afterwards, after the big balloon crash. Yeah, I love you and I'm sorry. I did lie about that one time I stole candy. But yeah, no, I think that was the last time we saw each other, yeah. What is your thing, like,
Opening
special
night.
interests, or is it just
Okay, you look pretty decent out.
All right.
Did you say the Griffins were at the game on the they were stopped in the box?
Oh, God.
Oh, they were in the box? I wondered where they were.
All right,
Yeah.
you guys ready? They'll be coming.
They weren't
Make a little
mingling.
walk right here.
I was wondering whether
Yeah,
they
because
were
every
big.
single stuff I go to.
Because you know, I would have
I
I would have mingled over to get a selfie with him.
Yeah.
I would have thrown my hat
But
back.
we don't have that like the stats. Like my favorite is some of us.
Isn't that crazy though? Because Ken Griffey
We have
Senior
on
was
our tool stack
very
page
good.
probably.
He won rings.
So,
Griffey's a Hall of Famer. He never got to win. Never played against him.
especially since Seattle.
At Seattle team.
Exactly. And well, you can actually see what you do. I feel it's
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. It's a very important topic we're going to be talking about today, and so we'll just jump right into it. Thank you all. Thank the mayor, city manager, and my team for being here to support. On Saturday, the 26th of October, officers responded to a shot spotter call in southeast Fresno at 17:23 hours or 5:23 p.m. in the 3700 block of East Platte. While officers were investigating, they were speaking with neighbors, running through their normal course of duty. One of our sergeants responded on scene and was sitting in his car nearby. It was about 18:25 hours or 6:25 p.m. when an individual showed up on scene. We would later learn that he was the suspect in the original shot spotter and a murder that we would shortly discover. The suspect drove up to the officer. Suspect Andy Morales, as you can see pictured here above me, 40 years old, from Fresno. Drove up to the sergeant who was parked in his patrol car along the curb, working on his computer, and opened fire viciously, striking the patrol car numerous times and striking the sergeant numerous times with gunfire as he sat in the patrol car. The suspect didn't exit. It was basically door to door as he pulled up to the patrol car and opened fire. The suspect continued driving on. The sergeant, being struck with gunfire, had the presence of mind to activate his body camera at that moment and initiate a really short pursuit about 1 block until the suspect apparently intentionally spun out and then abandoned the vehicle and jumped out of it, where it came to rest nearby on the sidewalk. The suspect exited the vehicle, as did the sergeant, and I will just call a gun battle ensued. Numerous gunshots were fired, both from the suspect, from the sergeant involved, and about 49 seconds elapsed before another officer was able to arrive, to locate the sergeant and assist him with addressing the suspect in his vicious attack. The suspect really showed apparent intent to hurt the sergeant. Not only was he firing rounds at him, he was repositioning himself multiple times, going to the ground, standing up, finding places of cover and concealment to prevent himself from being struck by gunfire while the sergeant was engaging him. Eventually, the sergeant began to suffer the effects of several gunshot wounds as the other officers arrived on scene to assist him. 2 other officers who arrived on scene also fired shots at the suspect, and within moments he was down to the ground. Officers were able to contain that momentarily while they began providing first aid to the sergeant, including applying tourniquets to prevent him from bleeding out. This suspect continued to lay on the ground until officers also provided him with first aid nearby. The firearm was still on the ground, so they had to obviously use caution while they approached the suspect and took him into custody, and then provided the medical aid and called an ambulance for him as well. I should say that the sergeant had the presence of mind before succumbing to his injuries and going into shock to call for an ambulance for both himself and the suspect. So that's very remarkable to me. I want to make sure I don't miss anything for you before we get to questions. Once the scene was secure, both the suspect and the sergeant had been transported to CRMC. Officers had to resume their investigation into the original shot spotter because we still hadn't completed that. They went back to the location of the residence where the shots were fired and were able to gain entry. And what we didn't talk about a lot Saturday night when I spoke to the media was that murder. What we discovered was a murder victim inside. As you can see on the other side here, Mario Ternora, 43 years old, of Fresno. We located Mario inside with both gunshot wounds and stab wounds, and a very vicious crime scene indeed. We learned that Mario and Andy had been friends since childhood, and we really don't know what the conflict was on this particular day that resulted in Mario's murder at the hands of Andy. We do know that Andy was a gang member. Andy had prior convictions for an assault with a deadly weapon, a bat. He had multiple other arrests for DUI and domestic violence related charges and weapons charges. I want to share with you, before I turn it over to the mayor here for his comments, how proud I am of our officers. They faced just probably the worst day of their life on Saturday. And when I visited the sergeant yesterday in the hospital, he told me he was glad it was him that was shot instead of his officers. And I want you to know that because that's a testament to the leadership of the people at the Fresno Police Department, from our sergeants, our lieutenants, our captains, and onward to deputy chief. They care about their people just like they care about the community. And I think that, in a nutshell, tells you what kind of the caliber of individuals we're dealing with here. The officers, watching them, and eventually we will release this body camera. We just still aren't quite in a position to do that. We're still going through the investigation. But when we do, you're going to see several officers who arrived on scene whose calm and courageousness was beyond measure. You can see they're applying the tourniquet. They're trying to reassure the sergeant, keep him conscious, lifting his legs to prevent him from going into shock. And it's truly compelling video that I'm looking forward to you being able to see, because it will tell you exactly what our officers face in these type of deadly situations and how their training that they receive, the tools they have.
Thank you, Chief. Much appreciated. You know, the job of a police officer is inherently dangerous, and we got to see this Saturday night where this sergeant came under gunfire, was ambushed, and was seated in his patrol car when a suspect came up and fired high caliber round a weapon at him multiple times, striking his vehicle. But when I got the call on Saturday night from Chief Casto, I brought back some horrible memories of all the incidents we've had over the years, the number of officers that we've had shot, but fortunately hadn't lost one in the line of duty. But police officers deal with the worst of the worst. Every single day they go out there, they put their life on the line, and they're out there for one reason: it's to keep people safe. And as they keep people safe, they're the ones that put themselves in danger and in harm's way. And that is why it is so important for us, for me as the mayor, former police chief, for the city manager, for us to be able to provide them with the appropriate staffing levels and make sure that our officers have the very best equipment to keep them safe, technology, and certainly the training that will allow them to be able to respond in incidents like this. And it's also important for we, members of the community, to give our police officers the benefit of the doubt when they do make mistakes from time to time, because their job is so complex and they're having to make split-second decisions with limited facts, knowing full well they're going to be second-guessed after the fact by those folks who have been presented all the facts. And that's why it's so important that we give them the benefit of the doubt. But we're here today as a result of God's grace. God's grace that is allowing us to talk about a police officer who was wounded in the line of duty versus a police officer who was killed in the line of duty. The number of rounds that were fired from close proximity, and the number of rounds that struck that patrol car, and the rounds that ultimately struck this sergeant in both of his legs. We're very, very fortunate. We're not here today talking about the death of a police officer. It's very personal. Me, because I happen to be good friends with this sergeant. A sergeant I've known for many, many years, a good family man, has been a great police officer, and he is somebody that I have a great deal of respect for. He's somebody that worked in our intel unit for many, many years, and he was the one who was providing protection detail for me many times over the years. And so I owe him much, and I'm very thankful today that he's going to be okay. But it was very apparent, and watching the video and just hearing from the details of this incident, how the training of this sergeant had kicked in, the way that he responded, the tactics that he used, the survival skills that played a role in allowing him to do what he did. But I think what's most astounding to me is after you've been shot, it's not natural to pursue a suspect like this sergeant did, because he knew that he was a danger. He presented a danger to the public, and he was not going to allow that person to get away. And he put his life in incredible danger when he responded to this incident. He was relentless and not allowing this individual to escape, and he acted with extreme valor and extreme courage. And in fact, in my 40 years of law enforcement, I'm not certain that I saw another incident that rose to this level in terms of a heroic act of bravery that was presented by this sergeant. When I had the opportunity yesterday with the city manager and Chief Casto to go by and visit with the sergeant and his wife, to hear him say that he was glad that he was the one that was shot and not his officers, because the officers that were on scene were in their early 20s, the same age of his children, and he was looking out for those officers just as he would look out for his own kids. I think that speaks highly of this particular sergeant. I had the opportunity to pray with him, to pray with his family, to pray for healing, for a full recovery, and for comfort to be upon them. And I ask that all of you would also do the same. It is families that are the ones who suffer the most. They're the ones that are left behind oftentimes to worry about their loved one when they go to work. And I can guarantee you that this particular sergeant's wife and family will even be more worried each and every time he puts on the uniform and goes out to keep this community safe. My number one goal as a police chief when I worked here, and that goal remains today as the mayor, is to never lose a police officer in the line of duty. And I thank God through his protective hand that he allowed us to maintain that goal today, that we have not lost a police officer, but it was because of his protective hedge. I also want to spend time just to briefly praise the efforts of Chief Casto, the officers that were on scene, the ones that performed life-saving efforts, not only on the sergeant, but also upon the suspect, and the way that they responded heroically. And my praise also goes out to the Fresno Police Officers Association for their response. They're the ones that surround officers in time of crisis, along with the chaplain and the companion officers. All of them acted admirably in this circumstance. And that's what families do. That's what law enforcement families do. They wrap their arms around each other, love each other, and encourage each other in time of crisis. And that's what happened Saturday. And so I want to ask all of members of our public to continue to pray for this sergeant who's in the hospital still, that he would regain full use of his legs, and that he would be able to return to full duty, which is his desire. And also pray for his family. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Chief Casto.
Thank you, Mayor. Very nice. Mayor had a lot of wonderful sentiments. He's just things that I can only think of, I think, that he voiced to you, and I'm glad he was able to do so. I'm so thankful for our officers. It's what they do every day could end up just like this call. I mean, we handle over 450,000 calls for service a year, thousands and thousands of weapons-related calls and shot spotters. And, many times they don't have this outcome, but this one did. And that's what they do. They put their life on the line for the people in this city every day. And when someone attacks a police officer, not just attacking Fresno PD, they're attacking the fabric of society and everyone that lives in our city. So that's why when people wonder why this becomes such a big deal, there's symbolism behind it, and that's why it's really important to us to share everything that we can with you. So I know there were some details I probably left out that I'd like to open it up to questions now so I can cover those.
Chief, a couple of questions. First of all, how many times was he actually hit by bullets? You saw him in the hospital. How was he able to keep going? And was he taken to the hospital in a patrol unit?
So he was struck multiple times. There's at least twice, but there's some entry-exit, there's some shrapnel and things like that. So I don't want to get too particular because I don't know exactly all of that. And he was not taken in a patrol vehicle. He was taken in the ambulance because they were able to apply the tourniquet and make sure that he was not losing too much blood at the scene. So unless there's something that we can't, it's very rare that we load someone in a patrol car, but it can happen. This time it wasn't necessary. We had the tools, as I mentioned, to perform some life-saving efforts there at the scene. And there was one part to your question I don't remember.
How did he keep going?
Emotional and physical fortitude. There's nothing else. I mean, I can't believe that. I mean, I can believe, but it's astonishing. He was shot. He didn't even say that over the radio. He was shot. He knew he was shot. He activates his body camera. He's calling out that he's in pursuit of the suspect, and he puts his vehicle in drive and takes chase. And God's grace, I think the mayor said it best, and just his will to survive. He has a family. He loves those officers that work for him like they're his own children. And I truly believe, knowing the sergeant and knowing what he has said to me, it was to keep this community safe as well, because the suspect that would attack a police officer isn't going to stop with a police officer. And mind you, we didn't even know he'd committed this vicious murder just shortly before our arrival.
What kind of rap sheet does Morales have?
So he has a conviction for an ADW, or an assault with deadly weapon with a bat. He has arrests, not convictions necessarily, at least locally, for weapons violations, domestic violence related charges, as well as driving under the influence.
You said he was a gang affiliation?
He is a gang member. We do know that. and he's a prohibited person. So the firearm, we aren't clear on the origin. We're still investigating that. How he came to possess it, we don't know, but what I can tell you that he illegally possessed it. It was not a legally possessed firearm. He's a prohibited person, and it was not registered to him.
And when the sergeant was shot, was his door open, closed? Was the door any type of protection for him?
No, the door obviously was some protection for him, and the rounds went through the door, but it's a pretty powerful weapon. I don't think I talked about that, but it's an AR pistol firing 223 rounds, which are pretty powerful, and they went through the door and into the seat, into his leg. He told me even one into his taser that was on that side of his body, so there was some protection there as well. The window, I believe, was up, and as you can see in the patrol car, some of the damage came after the initial attack, but the rounds in the door came in the initial attack. And the window was down, I'm sorry.
And you talked about how this was one of the worst days for your officers. How are your officers and yourself doing during this time?
The officers are surrounded by a lot of support. I mean, they have to process it, and they're going to. But I hope in the end, the resilience is what's going to come through. We send our officers to training called Struggle Well. And one of the main principles of that training is that everyone gets post-traumatic stress, but it doesn't have to turn into disorder. There's also post-traumatic growth. And that's what we hope from this. These officers realized in this moment that they could perform under the worst of circumstances to protect their lives, their sergeants' lives, and ultimately additional lives in the community that were at risk from this suspect. So we do everything we can to provide them the support needed, follow up the FPOA, as Mayor mentioned, as well as our own internal chaplaincy wellness program, and just their peers reaching out to them and myself as well to make sure they have what they need and to let them know that they have the strength to get over this, to become better even, and come back to work and serve the community.
Chief, how long was the pursuit that he managed to chase after the
Yeah,
suspect, and then they got out and actually started battling?
Correct. I don't have the length and matter of time immediately available, but it was like 1 block. So, and it wasn't extremely high speed either from what I could see on the video, but it was about 1 block in total. And then, yes, the suspect turned a corner and he disabled the vehicle somehow. It might have spun out, but he abandoned it, and it continued moving and crashed kind of slowly. And as he was maneuvering around the vehicle, attempting to get a better shot at the sergeant from his vantage point.
Well, and as you said, it's one thing to get after somebody in the car, but then to continue and be able to get out.
Yes. Yes. There was 49 seconds of a gun battle between just suspect Morales and the sergeant before an officer was able to locate them and assist the sergeant in neutralizing the suspect and addressing the threat essentially until it stopped.
How often does a suspect come back to the scene of a shooting while officers are still there?
So rare that I couldn't even give you a percentage. Not something that we see a lot of. Obviously, there was a lot of ill intent there. We won't really ever know probably the extent of that based on the fact that he's deceased.
Any estimate on the recovery time for the sergeant?
He's still hospitalized, but we don't expect it to be too much terribly longer. But as day by day, I think they're still upgrading his condition rather until they're ready to release him. Yes, as of yesterday, no surgery was planned, but that could certainly change. I think he's still in the very early stages of recovery. And he's ready to get back to work. He already is talking about that.
And what does this do to your heart when you got the call?
I don't know why it was so unbelievably sickening. Thankfully, when I got the message, I knew that it didn't appear grave, because I'm not sure. I'm not doing a very good job articulating this for you because I haven't given it a lot of thought, because when something like this happens, we tend to go as police officers onto autopilot. And I haven't stopped to think too much about it because we've been working to investigate this case, take care of our officers. And that wasn't the only thing that happened that night. As important as this was, we had multiple other issues that we had to address and keep serving the community. No matter what happened to one of our officers, we still had to keep the city safe and moving forward. So I was shocked, dismayed, but also hopeful that I didn't sound like the injury was going to be a grave injury, and very, very concerned for our young officers as well, just in the beginnings of their career, making sure that we handle this properly so that it doesn't cause them long-term problems.
Can you talk a little bit about that 187? What homicide number is this so far this year in the middle of the month?
It's number 26. Last year, this time we had 25, so we're about even with last year, but this does make number 26. And I have to correct myself. I believe on the evening, on Saturday night during the press conference, I said we had 3 officer-involved shootings last year. It's actually a total of 5 for 2023. However, this is the first officer-involved shooting of 2024.
How far away did you find the victim compared to where the actual first shots at the police officer were?
The victim of the homicide?
Yes.
Inside of his house?
Yeah. How far away was that from where the officer was shot?
A matter of feet or yards, not miles. I don't want to guess. And I'd estimate less than 100 yards at the termination point of the short pursuit. I think there was kind of a circling around, and that's where it ended up close to the house again.
And 2 other officers were part of that shootout?
Yes, 2 other officers fired their weapons in addition to the sergeant.
And how many times was the suspect shot?
Approximately 7. But we still have a lot more to go. We haven't had a forensic examination done or anything like that yet. So that's a very preliminary answer.
And do you know if the suspect was under any influence?
We don't know if he's under the influence yet. We don't have toxicology, but there was narcotics located near him that apparently came off of his person. So there's a very good chance that he was under the influence of some type of controlled substance. Any other questions? Thank you for coming here and sharing the time with us. This is obviously really important to us, and I'm very grateful that it's important to you too.
And Mayor, I noticed you got emotional. Why are those emotions? What are you feeling? Is this because you're a former police officer? It's your community? What's going through your mind?
Well, anytime you're in a leadership position, as I was as a police chief for 18 years, you take it personal. You take the safety of officers personal. You take the safety of a community personal. And I continue to do that as a mayor. I feel personally responsible for the safety and well-being of every single police officer and firefighter that's out there on the streets today. And so when you know a police officer is out there risking their life and that they're shot, it hurts. When I got the call from Chief Casto, my heart sunk. I was... as I said, it triggers a lot of emotions in you because you really recognize how impactful that's going to be to the organization, the community, to the family, most of all. I've been in hospital rooms for many, many years praying with officers that I thought would lose their lives. And it really triggers all of those emotions because, I always used to tell families at every sworn-in ceremony that my number 1 goal was to never lose a police officer in the line of duty, and that we would do everything we could to keep that goal. And I remember one time when Brian Nieto was shot and his mother contacted me at the office or at the hospital, right in the emergency room, and said, "I thought you said you would never lose a police officer in the line of duty." And my response was, that's correct, and we're not going to lose one tonight. And we didn't. And so we've maintained that goal. And so it's very personal, and it should be for every person in this community, because those police officers are out there doing something that not everyone is willing to do. And so when one of them gets shot, we should rally behind them and pray for them and support them and encourage them. But it is emotional, very emotional for me.
I want to talk about, maybe Chief, this is a residential neighborhood, a school not too far behind. We talked about how if someone's willing to shoot at a police officer, it means really save the community as well in this area.
Yes, and I'm so glad you asked that question because one of the things I wanted to talk about was that neighborhood. The folks in that neighborhood have been nothing short of supportive, and we appreciate that. They've come forward with information where they could or offered well wishes where they could towards the sergeant's recovery. So we're very appreciative to the people in that neighborhood for supporting us, and we're sorry that they had to undergo such trauma Saturday night. But hopefully we're going to get together with them again and help them to heal the neighborhood and restore them to peace.
And do you guys happen to have any info now about if the suspect was under the influence or any toxicology reports like that?
We don't have toxicology back, but we were able to find a controlled substance near him, so it's believed he may be under the influence, but we don't know for sure yet.
At some point, excuse me, at some point the sergeant's going to be made public. Do you have an idea when you guys are going to talk about him?
Yeah, obviously he was involved in the shooting as well as being a victim of a gunshot wound, so we're trying to make sure we observe the appropriate protocols and rules and regulations with regard to release of his name, but we will talk with him and we'll have it out to you in the next several days. Anything else? Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.